Say it out loud. The boardroom is silent except for the scrape of her nails along the folder's thick edge. He stands at the far end, shoulders braced, that old limp more pronounced from the climb-up polished stone stairs. The CEO's voice cuts through. This is a waste of time, we're moving on. A heavy document drops to the table, landing between them. The man's gaze doesn't flicker. She snatches the paper, jaw tense. A hush deepens as the assistant whispers something in her ear. Her hand stops. Pages official stamped slip free. She's staring at signatures in quick slanted lines, unable to breathe for half a second. He lifts his left sleeve just enough to show a faded mark. Every word in the room seems to wait. The eldest board member speaks, slow and clear. You knew, didn't you? The CEO glances once, panicked. He does not look away. I did my job, you did yours, he says, voice even. She opens her mouth, but only silence answers. This is how power changes hands. Stay until the very end. It started 84 hours earlier in the lobby of the largest tower on South Pine Street. The main entrance doors slid open with a reluctant sigh, almost as if the building resented another burden coming in. Will Mercer stepped through careful, rhythm off by half a beat, left leg catching before he masked the limp with a stiff determination. Stripes of sun latticed the polished floor, turning the smudges below the reception desk into silver scars. He tried not to look at the line of suits clustered near the elevators, or the smudged blue application form pinched between his thumb and palm, creased, but filled with a precision that made each box obedient. He checked the clock, pulse quietly doing its own calculations against gas mileage, school pickup time, and the blank date on the latest rent notice stacked at home. 11 unanswered calls from the agency this month. Mercer exhaled, set his worn work gloves beside the application, and shifted his weight as his phone vibrated. 6th message today from the school, nothing urgent, just reminders no parent could afford to miss. The lobby was all glass, steel, and the orchestrated hush of people mildly annoyed by their own success. A woman approached with brisk, gliding steps, power suit carved to measure, voice sharp enough to trim corners off every sentence. Lorna Ashcroft. A glance took inventory of his calluses, the ugly knuckles, the discount brand shoes untouched by polish. She didn't bother lowering her voice. We need real applicants, she snapped at the assistant, not bothering to greet Mercer. This one's clearly not a fit, tear it up. The assistant hesitated, glancing at Will, then at the form. Lorna's gaze made resistance impossible. Now I'm late, do it. The sheet rustled, ripped down the spine. Blue paper split, half curling in the assistant's fist, half fluttering into Mercer's open palm. He folded it once. Her perfume lingered in the air, brittle floral overlaying antiseptic tile. Mercer bent fingers around the ruined form, jaw flexing once before he set it down on the edge of the desk. I'll take it back with me, wouldn't want to waste resources, he muttered, eyes unblinking. Lorna offered a tight, dismissive smile, the kind used in press releases when the news is less than favorable. See to it, he gets the right directions, parking lot, loading dock, wherever he needs to go. Mercer nodded once, gloves in hand, resisting the urge to check his leg for swelling. Inside, a dull heat moved between his ribs, a warning, not a fire. The elevator doors closed behind him, jaws tightening on opportunity. He pressed the button marked services. This would not be the end. Night came early to their 2-bedroom apartment above the corner pharmacy, settling in layers around functional furniture and a hint of lavender from the cheap oil diffuser on the shelf. Mercer let himself in as quietly as 7-year-old feet in new socks. A light rustle, Rosie already up, unspooling a roll of colored tape, tiny fingers twisting her miniature plastic stethoscope bracelet around her wrist. That plastic clink followed her everywhere. She wore it even in the bathtub. Hey, Dad, she called from the kitchen, voice echoing under low, yellow light. Did they give you their don't come back face? Will dropped his bag with a soft thump. He hesitated, hands on a chipped mug, then shrugged. They just weren't ready for the world's best driver, I guess. Rosie's brow pinched. If people decided by looks, you'd always lose. She grinned, then looked down at the stethoscope. Do you still want to be nice to people who don't like you? He set the mug on the table, slow, measured, so she didn't see the way his fingers trembled around the handle. That's how you know I'm really stubborn, he said quietly. Rosie unwound a note from her lunchbox. A smiley face teased the margin. Be kind, even when it's hard. Love, Dad. She dragged a chair across the linoleum, holding the keepsake in her palm like an anchor. Do you ever get tired of fighting? Will pulled in a breath, let it out through clenched teeth masked as a smile. The apartment held echoes, her mother's perfume bottle tucked behind stacked medical bills, a photo frame on the fridge, wife's handwriting on an envelope never mailed. He reached for Rosie, brushing crumbs from her hair. There are easier things, but I'm used to doing things the hard way. Rosie nodded, peering at her reflection in the microwave door. Did you ever drive an ambulance up a mountain? He paused, caught, no mountains in the city, Rosie. She pressed the stethoscope to his arm, but you're still my hero. The word seemed to fit awkwardly in her mouth, as if she was repeating something she only half believed. He glanced at the locked drawer above the desk, where a military coin hid beneath unpaid utility bills. Tomorrow he'd drive another shift, submit another application, and pack another note. Rosie grinned, holding out 3 blue jelly beans. I saved your favorites. He bent down, the old service injury murmuring in his hip, and pocketed the candy for later. Thanks, Doc, you always remember. That night, a single word on a sticky note by her bed, trust. Morning would come whether they were ready or not. Lorna Ashcroft's penthouse stretched over half the city block, all cold marble and panoramic glass, a landscape where wealth was architecture and distance from hardship was measured in floors, not miles. She keyed through text messages, barking out orders in clipped syllables. Schedule the lease review, follow up with Anderson now. Cancel the 4 o'clock if Weston's not confirmed. Her assistant, Sarah, hovered with a folder. Lorna waved her off. Bring coffee, Black, use the other entrance next time. A dozen screens tracked share prices, red and green flickering in clinical indifference, but her gaze kept wandering to the corner. Her daughter's photo, high school, faded out for something sharper. A string of urgent texts pulsed on the device. Mom, I need you. I can't sleep. Timestamps getting later, more desperate. Lorna's jaw flexed as she picked up the prescription bottle, rolling it between manicured fingers. She dialed without looking. Get the car ready. I want full reports by noon. Silence on the other end and unspoken weariness. Then the voice of her ex-husband. Megan relapsed last night. She locked herself in the bathroom. Maybe you should talk to her. Lorna gripped the bottle, the slip of her composure so fleeting only the painting saw it. Tell her I'll pay for the specialist if she wants it. He laughed, bitter. She doesn't care about the money at all. She ended the call, eyes fixed on the photo, a moment when addiction wasn't yet a word they whispered. The problem board loomed, quarterly numbers due, but what gnawed at her was not a number. Sarah reappeared. There's an issue with a new applicant downstairs, non-emergency driver, name's Mercer. Lorna waved a hand. Sort it, don't let HR waste time, he's not a fit. She returned to her screens, face illuminated by bluish LED light, cold, efficient, forced forward, not a hint left of whatever young mother stood in that photograph. Orders given, she returned to the choreography of progress. The world would not wait for Lorna Ashcroft. No one remembered the ambulance driver until the crisis began. The city was knotted with traffic that week, blockages pushing every schedule 5 minutes later than it could afford. Dispatch called Will, voice mechanical but threaded with urgency. Non-emergency transfer, high probability of early labor, stranded on Haller Avenue. No EMTs available. You good to swing east. He glanced at the dashboard, yard of service miles, a sticky notepad half filled with phone numbers, Rosie's stethoscope dangling over the gearshift. I'm closer than anyone. 40 blocks bled into a gray blur. He found the car pulled crooked to the curb, a young woman's knuckles chalk-white as she clutched her phone. Beside her, a little boy wailed, hiccuping for someone to fix the world. No first responders, no backup, distant sirens a rumor. Will slid out, favoring his bad leg, and pressed the call button on his earpiece. I'm NRT. I'm here to help. I need your consent for immediate transfer, he said, voice crisp, the same cadence that once held grand juries at attention. Contractions ripped through her mid-sentence. I can't, my water broke, he's coming now. He surveyed, sweat down her temple, pulse high, fear knotted in every movement. He knelt, compressing pain into focus, hands steady as he laid his jacket beneath her. Breath for me, squeeze, you've done the hardest part already. The boy tried to lunge, "Is mommy okay?" but Will caught him with calm, steering the little hand to his own. "You're her helper right now, keep counting for me." 2 minutes, 15 seconds, he kept count as the city blurred behind them. The baby's first cry split the chaos. Will worked through the afterbirth, using a towel and water from a bottle, checking the infant's color, wrapping him as best he could. His gaze met the young woman's. "You're both safe, I promise." A police cruiser arrived, late and unneeded. Will gave a list of vitals and events, ticking the ambulance's old laptop with the right codes, and only then did he sit back on the curb, letting the ache settle deep in his thigh. A bystander, toddler in tow, stared. "Never seen a driver do that, you a paramedic." His answer calm, "I'm not a doctor, just did what was needed." The medical staff arrived, chaos folding back to routine. The nurse lifted the swaddled baby, whispering thanks. Will nodded, pocketing Rosie's stethoscope in his vest. As he limped away, he caught the local security guard locking eyes with the cop, silent, calculating. Something unsaid passed between them. The next day, Lorna passed by the front desk, eyes barely grazing the newspaper. A headline, "Ambulance driver delivers child in rush hour rescue." She handed it back, lips tight. "Anyone could do basic first aid," she scoffed, striding to the elevator. "Don't act so impressed." But the assistant got on her phone as the doors slid shut, curiosity simmering in the silence. He had seen this before, 20 years ago. The witness, Glenn, the security guard with an old police patch stitched into the lining of his jacket, spent that night scrolling through databases. Mercer, ambulance division. Old records, spotty, inconsistent, just enough to suggest a resume written to minimize, not embellish. One scan of the city employee portal showed a declined transfer offer stamped 3 months ago, signed with an oddly decisive hand. Monday, Glenn stopped at the Human Resources office, lowering his voice. "Can you pull Mercer's file?" The clerk shook her head. Restricted access flagged high priority. Glenn looked down, recalling the woman in labor, the sequence of events. The protocol followed to the letter, with a finesse that reminded him of training drills long abandoned for the monotony of lobby doors. Something didn't fit. He typed the words "federal service," "prior employment" into the old agency portal. No results public. Later, Rosie sat cross-legged under the kitchen table, brain at work on a construction paper, "get well" card, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth. Will washed dishes, warm water fogging the window with temporary hope. "Dad, are people always fair if you help them first?" He wiped a plate, letting her words fan out into the room before answering. "No guarantee, Rosie." "But she needs a friend," Rosie insisted, holding up the card with a stethoscope drawn in blue marker. "Even if she lies." Will's hands stilled. He reached over, swiped a lock of hair from her forehead. Her gaze never wavered. By dinner time, the calendar beeped, highlighted in urgent red, an appointment blinking. Deportation review, 96 hours remaining. Rosie looked up at the sound, tracing each digit with a finger. He closed the laptop, unwilling to explain any of it. Tomorrow deserved layers of mystery for her. Meanwhile, in an underground parking lot, Glenn intercepted Lorna's fixer, Boyd, 6 foot, neat jacket, breath always a half second behind the conversation. Glenn started first. "Looking for the ambulance driver?" "I don't waste time on temp staff," Boyd snapped, scanning the row of cars. "They said he delivered a baby yesterday. Didn't see that on the resume." "Coincidence, he's lucky, stay out of it." Glenn stepped forward. "Some people make their own luck." Boyd's laugh was short. "You don't want to get involved, old man." "Maybe not," Glenn replied, stepping back, "but someone should." Glenn's suspicion grew knotted over the next day, pieces settling into a puzzle with edges that didn't quite meet. He left a message for Will, "Just checking in, you might have more friends in this building than you think." Will's response, quiet but clear, "I'm not interested in friends, let me handle it my way." Rosie wandered in, coloring the last page of her stethoscope storybook. "Dad," she said, "would they still send us away if you saved someone?" He shut his eyes for a moment, pain pushing its way to the surface. There were no easy answers, only the kind that kept a child's trust aloft for one more night. Glenn turned off his computer. The feeling would not let go. By midweek, pressure escalated. Lorna's number came up on Will's phone, timing precise as a tax deadline. "You're interfering with workflows," she said, voice even but clipped. "If you keep inserting yourself, you'll lose whatever spot you think you have here." Will pressed speaker with a steady thumb, folding his lunch napkin into narrow strips as Rosie packed her backpack in the hall. "You called the school?" he asked, as bland as a weather report. "Enrollment letters can be rewritten," Lorna said, tone flat. "Don't test the limits I set." He let the silence hang. "I think your real problem isn't with me. Maybe check your own house for fires next time." There was a long, scraping exhale on her end before the call dead-ended. That afternoon, Glenn emailed Will. "Glenn here, they've put you on a blacklist. You should know sooner than later." Will replied, "Doesn't matter. I have one call to make. I'll cover my side." Lorna, meanwhile, summoned her board to the 37th floor conference room, glass-lined and bathed in illusory power. "Make sure Mercer doesn't get inside today. Block his parking spot. Reinforce security." Her words, imperial and direct. Sarah leaned in. "Won't that draw attention?" Lorna shot her a glare. "Follow the order." On the school playground, Rosie sat alone. Her favorite teacher, Mrs. Nguyen, knelt beside her. "Rosie, why aren't you with your friends?" She fingered her stethoscope necklace. Sometimes people forget what being brave means. At home, Will sent a single, encrypted message from the laptop hidden in his closet, voice low, face coiled as if storing up patience for a war rather than a Wednesday. "This is Mercer. Yes, you can come now." He closed the screen and let his hands drop to his lap. He should not have made this her problem. The final showdown unfolded in the boardroom, a circle of black glass and faux optimism, ownership staked not in words but in eyes that never quite met. Lorna sat poised at the head, her daughter's text unanswered on her hidden phone screen, power insulating her from mistakes she would never admit aloud. "Let's get this over with," she told her assistant. "Announcements first, bring everyone in." Journalists crowded the corner, board members shuffled notes. The elevator chimed, a sound so subtly out of tune that everyone looked up. Will entered, not in uniform, but a battered gray suit pulled from the back of his closet, Rosie's stethoscope clipped to his wrist like a souvenir or a challenge. Glenn followed a half-step behind, silent, holding a thick brown envelope. Lorna's lips folded into a practiced smile. "What are you doing here?" she shot. Will said nothing, walking steady, limp pronounced but flaw-owned, not hidden toward the screen at the end of the table. The eldest board member, Mr. Tillman, slow-moving, heavy-voiced, stood up. "Miss Ashcroft, we have new information. Would you care to address it?" On the screen, pages flickered. Sealed court records, service citations, an official photo. Mercer in formal attire, hair clipped short, gazed straight into the camera's lens. His federal prosecutor record. List of decisions, awards, cases attached, most classified, one massive. The air flattened. Board members shifted in their seats. The journalists' pens hovered above paper. Sarah looked down, lost for words. Lorna's fingers whitened against the folder. "This is a waste of time. We're moving on." Her voice barely made it to the wall. Glenn set the brown envelope on the table, the plop of authority. "You knew, didn't you?" Lorna's hand hovered uncertain. She snatched the envelope, thumb scrambling across government letterheads, her lips parted, searching for purchase on a truth now exposed. More than one name, multiple signatures, a transfer order unsigned but attached. Declined position Mercer, external conflicts of interest cited. A senior role she wanted but never earned. Will stood unmoved. He peeled his left sleeve back to reveal a faded mark, service not only accomplished, but denied its victory for someone else's ambition. No one blinked. Two assistants stared at their shoes. Mr. Tillman tapped his pen 3 times, slowly. A city reporter's mouth flexed, then held open, waiting for an answer none would come. Lorna went for defiance, but defeat circled the edge. "You come to humiliate me? Is that your purpose?" Will held her gaze. "I did my job, you did yours." He said it not as judgment, but as ledger entry. She stared at him, breath shallow, then looked away to the window, all her power sliding out between polished fingernails. Silence answered her, the confession that only consequences can provide. Every rise ends. She opened her mouth, but only silence answered. 6 months came and went. A new assistant, Sarah now advanced, arranged contracts seated at the very table where power once weighed down the air. Outside, market freezes spidered through the financial sector, the city whispering of collapsed stock, new faces in glass offices. Lorna's name retreated to a print at the bottom of a resignation announcement. At the local school, Rosie unwrapped a sandwich from her lunch, tucked under the wax paper. Be true, especially when it's hard. Love, Dad. She showed Mrs. Nguyen the stethoscope bracelet, snapping it proudly. My dad says being brave can be very quiet. Across the street, Will waited by the fence, limp steadier now, hands tucked in battered pockets. Rosie skipped over, arms flung wide, plastic stethoscope flashing in the sun. Dad, do you still get tired of fighting? He knelt so she could look him in the eye. Not when I'm with you, Rosie. She smiled so wide it cracked the day open just a little. Inside that brief pause, the world recalibrated. A man's worth was no longer set by who tore up his applications or the boldness of a woman's accusation. It was measured instead in the hush of a boardroom when history is rewritten, in the quick glue and crayon repairs of a young girl's heart, and in the way a legacy endures not in noise, but in what remains after silence. When the uproar dissolves and the evidence lies bare, all that's left is whose hand you still hold as you walk out into the unremarkable light. The following Thursday began with rain. Not the steady, comfortless type that glossed the city in silvery streaks, but a fitful, stop-and-start affair, as if the weather itself couldn't make up its mind which world to belong to, mercy or endurance. Will woke early, the faint ache in his hip a metronome for another day's uncertainties. Rosie still slept, hair wild on her pillow, clutching the stethoscope where the plastic had grown warm from her hand. In the kitchen, Will laid out lunchboxes and counted the spoons. Each motion was deliberate, his mind tracing the lists behind each drawer and shelf. Bills, groceries, deadlines, all the gnarled branches of responsibility that sprouted from a single root, her. The phone vibrated once, screen blinking with a local number. He thumbed it open, voice low so as not to wake her. Mercer here. Mr. Mercer? The voice was unfamiliar, younger, hesitant, but locked in the rhythm of someone assigned a task. It's Alan from Community Affairs. I wanted to talk about your transfer request. That's been resolved, Will said, glancing at the sticky residue left by a peeled-off price tag on a mug. Well, yes, but there's a new opening. They asked for you. Emergency Services Liaison, coordinates training for, well, situations like last spring's. Apparently you made an impression. Will shut his eyes for a moment, the bone-deep tiredness flickering beneath his ribcage. What's the salary? The pause on the other end was a beat too telling. It's a step up, benefits, tuition options in case you're interested. He let out a breath. For the first time in months, a thread of hope cut through the persistent gloom. Email the details, I'll look them over. He ended the call and listened to Rosie's slow breaths, letting himself hope, just enough to last another day. Downstairs, Glenn waited by the lobby's coffee cart, newspaper folded under his arm, umbrella dripping a patient pool near his shoes. He recognized the limp first, then the ease, the new steadiness in Will's step, the faint lift in his shoulders. He smiled, rare and genuine. Told you you'd outlast them all, Glenn said, offering a paper cup. Will took it, warmth leaching into his fingers. You were the only one who bet that way. Glenn shrugged. When you've seen enough boardrooms come and go, you learn to tell the difference between authority and the real thing. He let the silence fill, then added, they found Ashcroft's file, buried it behind a layer of discretionary approvals, but HR finally had to acknowledge the paper trail. She left without contest. His tone carried less vindication than a quiet respect for the process. Doesn't bring much satisfaction, Will said, sipping. I've been on both sides of too many tables to enjoy it. Glenn watched him. What's next? Will held his gaze. Something steadier, I hope, something that doesn't vanish when a name changes on a door. Glenn nodded as if blessing the idea. Then, after a second, Rosie still wants to be a doctor. Will grinned, the rare kind that took effort. This week, she's considering astronaut doctor. Last week, it was detective nurse. They always aim higher than we did. Both men shared a small laugh, short and earned. Rosie that morning woke to find a fresh pair of socks perched on the edge of her bed, sky blue with tiny red capes embroidered at the ankle. She laughed, clutching them to her chest. In the kitchen, she wrapped her arms around her father, socks in hand. "Can you come to career day?" she asked, eyes wide. "You have to bring your stethoscope." He ruffled her hair. "I think I can do that," he said softly, "but you have to share it this time." She feigned horror. "It's my good luck charm." He winked. "Then maybe we'll bring double luck." They walked to school in the thinning drizzle, Rosie skipping every fourth step, the stethoscope in her pocket and her hand slipped into his. At the crosswalk, Mrs. Nguyen waved from beneath a floral umbrella. "Big news, Rosie. The hospital called. They want someone to visit and talk to recovering patients. I thought of you and your dad." Rosie looked up, eyes shining. "Really, could we?" Will nodded slowly, looking down at her, his answer weighted with all the hope he wanted for her. "Absolutely." Rosie's class gathered in their makeshift hospital corner, a row of desks set with paper bandages and cardboard thermometers. When Will entered, some of the students cheered, faces round with anticipation. "Is it true you saved a baby?" one boy blurted, awe unhidden. Will knelt, careful of his hip. "Sometimes you find yourself in the right place at the right time. Sometimes you just do what needs doing, even if you're scared." Rosie puffed up with pride. "My dad says you don't have to be a hero to help someone who needs it, but it helps to know how to be brave." Will grinned, holding his daughter's gaze. "The important thing is you show up, even when it's difficult, even when someone tells you you're not good enough. Especially then." At the back of the class, Mrs. Nguyen watched, her eyes shining. Afterward, she guided him into the hallway, voice soft. "You know, a lot of families talk about leaving, about giving up and starting over somewhere less hard. You made them believe in staying." Will swallowed, letting her words rest between them. "Sometimes hope is all you can offer." Rosie skipped alongside him home, the memory of applause wrapping around her like a scarf. She pressed the stethoscope into his palm. "You'll need this," she whispered, "for next time." That night, as rain traced lazy lines down their window, Rosie drew pictures for her mom, careful, bright drawings she folded into an envelope for the box of keepsakes under her bed. "Do you remember her voice?" she asked in the darkness. Will's words caught in his throat. He laid a hand on her shoulder. "I remember the way she laughed. It sounded like the end of a thunderstorm." Rosie's breathing slowed. "When I'm scared, can you laugh like that for me?" He squeezed her hand, his own laughter wrestling with the ache in his chest. "I'll try my best, Rosie." The months rolled slowly as winter edged in. The city's towers collected pale sunlight and the plaza filled now and then with music, buses crowding the curb as shift workers punched time cards and students trailed into schools. On the first day of his new role, Will found his badge already waiting, a crisp rectangle with his photo, and below it in careful type, "Mercer William, Emergency Services Liaison." He worked in a small, sunlit office on the 8th floor, with a view of the park and a scuffed chair that spun too easily. His desk filled with hand-drawn notes and crayon cards signed Rosie Mercer, Doctor, Nurse, Detective. Sometimes his old jacket hung on the coat rack, the faded sleeve still carrying the memory of harsh circumstance and harder choices. He built new routines, a walk at lunch through the hospital corridor, a round of coffee with Glenn in the lobby, and weekly meetings with Mrs. Nguyen and the school board to coordinate medical outreach. At home, Rosie's world expanded. She joined the aftercare tutoring group and started a new diary, its first entry adorned with glue glitter letters. "Today I met a real patient and I wasn't even scared. Dad says bravery is like breathing, sometimes you have to do it on purpose." Their apartment carried the warmth of small victories, Rosie's spelling certificate on the fridge, Will's promotion letter pinned beneath it, a battered mug with the faded price tag still showing. The lavender scent clung to the corners, memory and hope all tangled up. One Sunday, as snow clung to the gutters, Will and Rosie sat side by side, hands busy over construction paper and old medical journals. "Dad," Rosie said, voice bright with mischief, "do you think people can really change?" He looked at her, the question heavy with meanings she couldn't yet name. "I think most people can learn to do better if they want to." She nodded, satisfied, turning the page. And if they caw? Will tilted his head. Then we just keep being ourselves anyway, that's what matters most. From the radio, the distant melody of an old love song filled the room. They worked quietly, peace settling soft around them. And though the world outside remained sharp-edged and uncertain, inside there was something approaching enough. Laughter, shared burdens, the space grown between adversity and resolve. Late in the winter, a letter arrived, stamped with the city's seal. Resident status permanent. Will sat at the kitchen table, fingers trembling only a little as he pushed it toward Rosie. "What's it mean?" she asked, wide-eyed. He looked at her, smile soft but fierce. "It means we get to stay, we belong here." She jumped up, flinging her arms around his neck, laughing that wild, thunderstorm's end laugh. "We're staying, Dad, we're really staying." He hugged her close, the long years winnowed behind them at last. Outside, stray notes of wind and siren reminded him that nothing was perfect, but for now, permanence was enough. Meanwhile, Lorna Ashcroft existed on the city's edges, a collection of unread emails and curt voicemails, a consulting title with a firm that needed her name but little else. Her new offices, smaller, lower, still lined in glass but now shaded by concrete pillars, bore the hollow echo of ambition stifled. She checked her phone for Megan's texts, each one a tangle of hope and reproach. One, unopened for days, simply read, "I'm trying, Mom, are you?" Lorna watched the cursor blink, temptation rising to answer with the brevity power allowed. Instead, she typed slowly, each word a deliberate effort, "I am here. Tell me what you need." She hit send. Maybe that was a new beginning, or maybe it was only a truce. Even power, she thought, could be measured in vulnerability if you let it. She found herself reading news articles, stories of quiet heroism, anonymous emergency workers, families reconstructed from chaos. They all felt impossibly distant, and yet she returned to them, searching for the echo of something lost for good. The board, under new direction, reached out as rumor filtered through back channels that Mercer had rebuilt city protocol, implemented new safety nets, trained hundreds in methods that turned strangers into lifelines. Even in modest office light, his name inspired not awe but consensus, a rare sort of legacy. When a new emergency rocked the edge of the city, Will coordinated from his desk, dispatching teams, steadying anxious voices. His phone rarely stopped ringing, his patience stitched the cracks of a system that had once tried to wash him away. One dusk, as he was locking his office, Glenn met him at the door. He had a package under his arm, a broad, flat box tied with midnight blue ribbon. "Open it," Glenn said. Will peeled paper back to reveal a shadow box. Inside, his frayed work gloves, Rosie's first crayon-drawn stethoscope, a photo of that long-ago ambulance, and a quote inscribed in simple script, "To the one who stayed and made us braver." Will blinked, speechless. Glenn simply clapped his shoulder. "We're all better for you being here, Will, don't forget it." Will's throat tightened. He nodded, unable for a moment to find words heavier than gratitude. "Thank you, Glenn," he said finally, quiet and certain. At home, Rosie was waiting, feet swinging from the sofa, books open to stories of women astronauts and doctors and detectives. She looked up, bright-eyed. "Want to see my shadow box, Dad?" He laughed, setting his own beside hers filled with candy wrappers, old report cards, and a Polaroid of the two of them in front of an ice cream truck. "Mine's missing something," he teased. She reached over, plucked her stethoscope from the ledge, and pressed it into his hand. "For both of us," she whispered. "You can give it back whenever you want, it's for the next adventure." He wrapped her in his arms, the city twilight pressing close, and felt, for once, unburdened. The past's sharp edges had dulled. All that really mattered was gathered here, in laughter and fleece pajamas and the quiet certainty that sometimes surviving is its own kind of victory. They didn't talk about the boardroom anymore, or reckonings, or the reason his limp ached less each day. Instead, they pieced their future together, patience gluing each day to the next. Rosie's trust, hard-won and bright, became his compass. Will's steadiness, neither dramatic nor loud, grew, stone by stone, into a monument their small family could shelter beneath. On the first day of spring, Rosie sprinted out the school doors, hair wild, cheeks flushed. "Dad, come quick," she shouted, dragging him into a cluster of parents and teachers gathered by the garden. In the center, Mrs. Nguyen held up a certificate, "Community Champion, Rosie Mercer and Family." The crowd applauded. Will felt his throat grow thick, embarrassment muddling with pride. Rosie seized his hand, lifting it high. "He's why I'm not afraid to help people," she said boldly. Will bowed his head, heart thundering with humility. Later, as dusk blanketed the city, Rosie climbed onto his lap, tracing his faded service scar, a legacy of struggle worn now with quiet pride. "Did it hurt?" she asked, gentle. He considered. "It did, but I learned to keep going anyway." Rosie pressed her stethoscope to his chest. "I can hear your brave heartbeat," she announced. They laughed together, their joy reverberating over the scars of old battles and the uncertainty still ahead. For the first time in years, Will let himself picture decades rolling forward, Rosie growing, new adventures finding them, ordinary miracles adding up to something immense. When she fell asleep, he carried her gently to bed. On her pillow, she had placed his old military coin, and on the nightstand, a sticky note. "Remember, trust." He stood by the window, city lights blurring through the rain's prism, the echo of boardrooms and broken systems receding. There was no grand ceremony in the resilience they'd won. Just a father's heartbeat, a daughter's faith, and the quiet promise of tomorrow shimmering just beyond the glass. Their story continued, resilient and true, in the hush that fell long after all the voices stopped carrying power. When, after everything, all that endured was the love they had found, and the new world they crafted together from the stubborn, shining remnants of hope.